So I would like to start the recording and also get the ball rolling. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining session 5B, Name That Image, Types of Images, and How to Make Them Accessible to All session. My name is Didem Ekici. I'm the moderator of this session, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to this presentation. Before we listen to our wonderful presenter, Jennifer Culver, I would like to remind you a few housekeeping items for today. Please ensure that your microphone is muted when you're not speaking to minimize any background noise. Also, please pose your questions using the chat function that we'll moderate and discuss with our presenter later on. And toward the end of the hour, we'll share how we can continue the conversation online and share some additional resources. Also, just a quick reminder, this session will be recorded and uploaded in our YouTube channel. So if you would like to go back and watch it again, you can subscribe our YouTube channel, which I'll share in the chat box in a second. And lastly, we're using automated Zoom captions that we will edit the recording transcripts before we share them with you. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you will see a closed caption button, and you will see the live transcript text underneath that button. Select to turn them on or off as you prefer. Now, I'd like to pass the microphone to Jennifer Culver, and excited to listen to her.
Great. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for choosing to come and spend a little bit of time with me today. We're going to be talking about images, specifically with accessibility. And I have a couple of different ways that you can interact with us as we're moving through today, should you choose to. I hope you do. We are on Nearpod. The Nearpod code is always going to be sitting right up here at the top, where you can join in that way, or just type some ideas and thoughts in the chat. Either way, I'm really glad you're here, and I think we can have some time to learn quite a bit from each other on this interesting topic. My role at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas, is that I'm the Senior Academic Technology Services Director for the Simmons School of Education and the manager of the university's online production services team. So I manage the team that creates the online content for both credit and non-credit certification like courses here at Southern Methodist University. But my first question is just why are we talking about this today? Why do we need to make images accessible? And so if you're in Nearpod, you can type an idea here that'll pop up on the board, or if you're in the chat, please go ahead and put this into the chat. Why are we talking about images needing to be accessible? What's wrong with images just the way they are? So you can, with this corkboard, just type something in and click, and it just pops up like that. There we go. Describes the internet behind selecting visual stimulation. Absolutely. We need something that will describe what that image is, because not all people can see them. Right. And in the chat, we also have screen readers. The idea that there can be some visual impairments. And so when the screen reader is coming across something that is an image, the screen reader needs to know what to say, because it will just say image, but it won't say what it is, or it might say what the image is saved as. And sometimes we save our images without very clear words. I do at times. Yes, and we have to stay cognizant of different devices. That's incredibly true as well. So for all of these reasons, when we include our images, we have to think about how we can make those images accessible to all of our learners who may encounter them. And I just wanted to talk for just a second about the fact that when we're looking especially at online content, most of the quality rubrics that assess online content do have places where they talk about accessibility for images as well. The Quality Matters rubric in strand 8, specifically 8.3, talks about accessible text and images and explains that those need to be in the files, in any documents, on any page in the learning management system, on any web page that we send our learners to, that those images need to be accessible. And the OLC one, the Oscar rubric, also has a section that talks about this in strand number 35, a text equivalent for every non-text element is provided. Alt tags for images, captions for videos, transcripts, all of those kinds of things need to be made available. So if we're using some of these rubrics that address best practices, this need is addressed in those as well. Typically, when we are working with faculty and we come across a PowerPoint slide or an LMS slide or a website where an image has been included, the first question that we ask is, does that image contribute to the content, or is it just there for aesthetic reasons? Is it there because it's colorful, because it's funny, because it somewhat thematically relates to the slide, but it really isn't conveying information? And if the answer is yes, the image contributes to the content, that's what this talk is about. Then we need to figure out what kind of image it is and what would be the appropriate description for that kind of image. If the image doesn't, then there's a way in the alt text to mark it as decorative, so the screen readers would just keep going and not even address that the image was there. But this question really is at the heart of what I'm talking about today, this idea that how specific do I actually need to be on these alt tags and these alternate descriptions? And how much detail should I provide? And the question, as always, is, well, I mean, it depends. And if we're not specific enough, the learners may miss very key information. So here's an example. Imagine that there is a content page in front of you. There's an image there that you cannot see. Instead, you just see that this page contains photos of dogs. The instructor then says, let me know when you've entered in your choice. If you had to figure out what on earth we're talking about, if you want to try your hand at it, draw what you think this image conveys, or you can type in the chat. If all it says is photos of dogs and the instructor says, let me know when you've entered your choice, we don't have enough specificity to really understand what we're supposed to be entering. So in the chat, or if you feel adventurous, you can draw, what do you think is going on here? And so I will take a crayon, and I am not the artist in our family. That would be my daughter, but I can make a stick dog. So there's a dog. Well, at this point, it could also be a cat, but okay, it's a dog. And then there's maybe 3 more. 2 dogs next to each other, pick one. Right. We can just say, let me know when you've entered your choice. Are we choosing a dog? What are we choosing? So if you are unable to see that image, we really are at a loss here on what we're supposed to be doing. And the other part is, we're at a loss for why this matters and what we're saying when we're making our choice of image. Anybody else want to make a guess, either in the chat, or nobody can draw a worse dog than that? So feel free to try your hand at drawing. Maybe I should have just drawn dog faces or a bunch of dogs in a car or something, because it's just photos of dogs. Okay, now I'm going to show you what the actual photo was. Here's the photo. It's a little bit hard to see there, so I'm going to stop this share for just a second so I can show you the dog photo. So here's the actual photo. The photo is a photo of dogs with different expressions and different moods, and it says, "Which dog are you today?" So this is just a visual icebreaker that the instructor was using to just kind of start the class, get people talking, and to kind of see as a check-in, how are people feeling today? This is what it meant by choose your dog. So if this is what we meant by, let me know your choice, we're going to go back to the lesson here. And so how close were we? I was not at all close on mine. When they said, make your choice, I had no idea that it was talking about a dog that was conveying a mood or a state of mind or anything like that. So this is just kind of a hint as to how and why. Yeah, which dog are you today is actually also part of the image. So you're correct. It is also not readable either. Yep. Yep. This is just, and that's an important point to make because that's just a screenshot. So none of that would have been available. And here we go. So what we see then is that not all images are the same. And when we're looking at this need for specificity, we're going to look at several types of images today. The informative image is the one that we're mainly talking about, an image that conveys some type of information that's important to the learning experience. The decorative image is an image that really just is there for decoration, that is not going to convey any information. The screen reader can just skip on over it. It's fine. Functional images are a little bit different. Functional images are images that actually convey a function. So for example, if I had said with the which dog are you today? Or if we look over to the left of the image that's here with us, this map, or something like that, if I had something, well, not the map, but if we had the which dog are you today, if those numbers, the 1 through 9 numbers, were actually buttons that you could click on, that's a function, then it's performing a function. Typically, it's something that you can click on. If we're clicking on the image instead of clicking on text, then it's a functional image, but we still need to know what the functional image is of so we know what to click. Images of text, we just saw the example of that, the fact that if we're taking a screenshot, the screen reader doesn't know that there are words there. A complex image would be something like a graph or a chart. And if we have any instructional designers in the room and other faculty as well, we've seen people that want to create PowerPoints where they've taken screenshots of charts and graphs. But by doing that, there's no way for a screen reader to understand that. Those complex images, they require a lot more work explanation wise. And so we can talk about some ways that we can handle that. Groups of images are where we take a look at an image that has been made by layering a lot of images together. But when all those images were layered together, it wasn't then resaved as one image. So there's a lot of images kind of all around each other as a cluster. And then of course, image maps, just like this one over here, if we had said, click all the places that you've been, you would be clicking on different things. But if the image has no description about where to click, then we don't know where to click. How do we stay away from redundancy of information? That's a really good question. I think that we look at, again, the role of the image itself. And if the image is not conveying information, then remember we can make that a decorative image. We also remember that the only people seeing some of the alt text is going to be the people who are specifically looking for it and have things set up on how to, on having that read for them. And Doug has put guidance on making charts accessible, and that's a great site. We have some resources coming up at the end of this as well that help with some of that too. So particularly on this slide, if we have this chart, as we just talked about it, which kind of image is this? This is the Gartner hype cycle. Because I like I love the terms on this. This one we've talked about is a complex image. It is an image that would need more explanation than something that is much simpler, because we would have to explain all of this. We would have to explain the axis. We would have to talk about what's happening there. So that would include, for example, even if something like that was on a test question, if that was something that students were answering multiple choice questions about, then everything on that needs to be conveyed accurately so that the students can answer those questions. Does this image require alternate text, or is it decorative? This is a functional image. So this is something where somebody would click on this and it would open up their calendar, or it would open up a link to be able to set up time or request something. But as a functional image, does it require alt text? This is that answer of, yep, yes, it does, because it's telling us what to do. And that schedule a consultation is words, and this is part of the button. So if this whole thing is a button, then we have to know what those words are saying, so we know whether or not we want to push the button. So now that we've looked at some of the images and that we've talked a little bit about the types. For example, let's take a look. We've already talked about some of this. What is the decorative image? Which one of these answers is the match for the decorative image? And I'll walk through a couple of them as well. So we've talked about how decorative images need what? No. Decorative images are this one. It needs no alternate text. And often there's something on the LMS that says, yep, exactly, Deborah. It's this one that with the needs. Good call. That says, nope, there's a checkbox you can say this is aesthetic only. We can move on. What about those functional images? Functional images, remember, are images that require that actually perform a function when we click on them. Yeah, it's this one, right? Describing the functionality of the button. And that way, what we're just saying is, just like on that click to schedule a consultation, yeah, this button provides access to the calendar so that you can schedule time. However you want to describe whatever that button is doing is what we want. And then we get into these images of text. When we've taken a screenshot that includes words, and because it includes words, the screen reader does not know that they're there. Which one would be the right one for this one? Not quite. It is this one. If it's a logo, then you can just say what the logo is for. But otherwise, the alt text should be the same as whatever the text of the image is, whatever text is on the image. We try to keep it as clear as possible. What about the complex images, the charts, the graphs? Just like we saw with the Gartner hype cycle. Almost. According to one of the resources we have in coming up for you, it is this one. It's about the data. We have to and so we have to convey the data in some kind of text equivalent. So if we are creating a table, for example, that has that data in it, then we also have to make sure that that table is accessible as well. But if students are going to be depending on that chart, that graph of information, then that data has to be available to them in some form or fashion. A lot of times people produce the table instead, but sometimes they create those long descriptions, really depending on what the chart or the graph is specifically showing. But as we've talked about before, when I've seen some of these really complex images in places like tests where there's a screenshot of a chart or a graph and students are answering questions about it, that's when we have to make sure that whatever we've provided as far as alternative text is giving the students enough information so that they can answer those questions as well. Our image map, if we had a map of the world and we are asking people to click, for example, all the places that they've visited or click where they're attending from, would be this one. Provide the overall context. So for example, this is a map of the world, and then provide alt text that describes all the places where you can click so that you can click on the right one. But if there are some places not available for clicking, you're only providing information on the places that can be clicked on so that they can make the right choice. So we're down to our informative images. Those are our kinds of images that could be something like an infographic. It could be important quotes. Well, no, it wouldn't. The quote is just images of text, but it could be infographics and it could be diagrams and things like that, not about data, but about other things. And when we're looking at those informative images, what we want is just a really short description that's conveying the essential concept of that image. But if that image is also there to help convey an impression or evoke an emotion, then we also have to try to explain that as well. And that's really why I picked, and I'm going to go back to my dogs. That's why I picked the dogs, because here we would have to find a way for these students to be able to make a choice, which means we can't just say there are 9 dogs. One of them has headphones on, one of them's holding a rose, some of them have a scarf or a bow. have some kind of headwear on there, we actually also have to convey the mood or the emotion that's coming off of these dogs, so that if this was something where someone wanted to participate, they would be able to participate. So we can't just say what they're holding, and we can't even just say the breed of dog. That's not enough either. We have to get into mood, expression, things like that. And so that's kind of why I picked the "which dog are you today" image for the text, but also for thinking about the words that we would use for some of these dogs, especially number 1 with the eyes, or number 7. How would you distinguish dog 7 from dog 5, for example? Because both of them have their tongues out. So what makes dog number 7 different than dog number 5? How would you describe the difference between these two? Yeah, one of them is in movement. And I think that's a really good thing to pick up on. This one is moving. Ears are different on each one. Absolutely. So yeah, we can talk about these differences that can help someone really get a good indication of what's happening here. And then we have our group of images. A lot of times when we have that group of images where someone has used several images to make one bigger image or to convey one bigger thought, it's really distracting to provide alt text for each one of those little images. And providing the alt text for all of the little images makes it so that we're not really getting the essence of what those little images are supposed to be containing. If possible, turning those little ones into one big one, or trying to find a way to provide a text alternative that explains what the group of images is supposed to be doing on that page is really important. So those are our different types of images. These are some of the different ways that we can work with all of these different image types. And, oh, it cut me off. But what are some ways that you convey the importance of image accessibility? And how do you handle this where you are and on your campus? Who's involved? What strategies are working well? Again, you've got the chat, or you've got the scorecard here on Nearpod, whichever one is easier or is your preference. But how do you talk about image accessibility, or how do you think about image accessibility in your own work? This became, at least for my team, a really big concern, because we were helping the engineering school come up with an online program for AI. And one of the faculty who was going to be developing quite a few of the courses and was the chair of the program, really, really great person. But a lot of the early PowerPoints were screenshots of code and screenshots of charts and things like that. And so we had to talk for quite a while about image accessibility and why some of those lines of code and things like that could be put into his slide deck and other places in a different way to make them more accessible. But it was a lot of conversation, really, as a whole, with everybody that was involved with that program, to be rethinking about all of the different things that they need to convey visually. So we've got one about sharing how inaccessible images are perceived by people who need accommodation is a really good start to emphasize the importance. And boy, I completely agree. We've got so many people who are in this field because they're they're caring people. They have things, knowledge and things they want to share. And most of the time when we show them these kinds of things, they absolutely want to come in and they want to help. Sometimes our faculty just don't know about any of this. We also have, I mentioned that it's about helping students with permanent disabilities, people with temporary situational disabilities as well. And that's a really good point. We've seen in literature how when we provide accessible, fully accessible information, and when we employ fully accessible design practices, that the design practices often benefit so many people besides just the people that we may have targeted them for. And so talking even about those temporary situational ones is really helpful. Yes, absolutely. I mean, and then we also, and Deborah's right, we also can talk to them about the fact that this is a requirement. I mean, this is the law. You have to have that. I mean, we want to go in with we want you to care about conveying everything you can to your students and caring about the students, but fundamentally, it still has to be done. Some faculty that I work with, according to Lee, get frustrated in situations like your dog's welcome activity. Right, it is a low prep, supposed to be fun activity, and then we come in and it turns into turning this into this really big thing. So they instead then they get rid of their dog activity and and want to do something that doesn't require as much work, because this was a 5-minute icebreaker and now it's turning into this big thing. And so Lee asked if there were any ideas for things like that, and I think that is a really good question. The idea that sometimes when you wanted to just show something that was fun, we find out here though, when that fun is not accessible, sometimes we have to just talk to them about different ways to have that fun moment. And so we can talk about how we could gauge their mood in an entertaining but accessible way. And it may not be that picture of dogs. It may be something else. It may be that they can type a range of different words in, or they can create, and so a word cloud gets created of all of the words that people are saying about how they're doing today. Or we can talk to them too about this idea of substantially similar, that we have different activities ready based on who our students are in our class. And so we can gauge their mood and we can gauge things in a lot of different ways. And we look at who we have, and then we choose the icebreaker that's going to give us what we want from this particular group of people. But that's a great point. Not enough discussion about images and text size during live classes or recorded classes, and that is a challenge. I think that you're absolutely right that looking at images and things like text size during live classes is incredibly important. We have plenty of students who are watching on their phones and on their tablets. And so looking at size is very important. I would also then talk about too the fact that as we're working with, or as we're designing these different courses for ourselves or for others, that we are checking things like text size in all of those locations. Having the set of the slides available in either slide or PDF form that's accessible, that someone can go through while the slides are happening, having discussions about the size of text and the heading structures and things like that can be really helpful too. The two places that I tend to go to the most when I'm working specifically with image and accessibility is WebAIM. I love some of their training, some of their infographics, but WebAIM has a color contrast checker that I really, really like. And we didn't talk about that as much because that's more of a text thing than an image thing. But the thing that I like about WebAIM's color contrast checker is that it allows you to start adjusting the colors until they actually are in compliance. And then you can go just change them to those colors, and then you're fine. You have to give up and start all over again. W3 is where they have a lot of tutorials specifically about working with images, how to work with images in online courses, definitions, and more. Of course, we've also got the WCAG standards themselves. We're working on how things are perceivable when we're working with image accessibility. But fundamentally, what we're talking about is making sure that we look at what kind of image it is and the function of the image, and how to make sure that we've been accessible with that image so that every student can perform and participate in an equitable way. And so with that, we've got 10 minutes left. Are there any questions or anything up for discussion? Humanizing the elements in images, about humanizing elements in images. Lee, that's a great question too. Are they decorative? If the purpose of our image is to humanize what we're talking about or something like that. Boy, I mean, everything when it comes to these kinds of things is it depends. But I would say that if the humanizing of that is important, then no, it's not decorative. And you can describe that image in a way that conveys that humanizing element of what that image is meant to convey, and then possibly about how that humanizing element ties into what the content is on that slide or on that page. Oh, not to alt text the word welcome that was in a banner. Well, if welcome is somewhere else on the page, then maybe that's not necessary, but I would have too. I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, the people who are going to see it are the people who need to see it. But I would have, absolutely, because I think that's a nice element that is trying to help create community. Any other questions, comments, anything that you'd like to share? I'm going to turn off the screen share. If you'd like to come off the mic, you're welcome to do that as well. We've still got about 7 minutes left.
Yeah, we have 7-8 minutes left. And Jennifer, thank you so much. Thank you for reminding us how important it is to make all the images we use in our course books, in our, Canvas shell, in our PowerPoint, accessible. So thank you so much for that reminder. And I also would like to add one more thing on about images. In addition to making them accessible, also one other thing Peralta Online Equity Rubric also advocates for is to make sure there's no hidden bias, or there's no stereotype, or there is no misrepresentation or underrepresentation in our images, right? It seems like it's a lot to go over all these things as we add images in our courses, but actually, if you do it from the start, seriously, it's way better rather than going back and changing them. But there's always a starting point, so why not today to go over all the images to make sure they're accessible and available for all students. But thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much again. I'm checking the chat box and very nice comments about the presentation. Please take a look. And feel free to unmute yourself if you have any final comments or questions for our presenter. Yes, Deborah.
Thank you for that comment too about looking at representation and bias in the images. I think those have to also be conveyed in any descriptions that we have as well, especially when the images are part of how we are approaching things like representation.
Yeah.
When a screen reader goes over and reads your alt text, if you have a title right after the alt text, the screen reader is going to read it twice. So you don't need to put the title in if you've got the alt text in. Also, in your alt text, I'm going to use, when you put your text in your alt text, if you just use quotes, if you just use the quote, you don't have to write descriptive, that basically it will just go over the image. You don't need to tell it that it's descriptive. The screen reader will just automatically go over the image if you have the quotes in there.
Yes, and that's why I think that Lee's comment about the welcome one and whether or not that needed alt text is such a good comment, because yeah, that's why I was saying, well, if the word welcome was somewhere else, then no, I don't think we'd need it, because the welcome then would have been repeated. But if that welcome was only conveyed by the banner and not anywhere else, then I would say, yes, we need it.
And Jennifer, finally, as final comment, I would like to say, I loved your slides.
Thank you.
And I just took a note of, is it nearpod.com?
Yep. Yep. And
yes,
yeah, and I picked that one just because it gave that ability to draw if people wanted to do the one drawing exercise. But that one is when I work with the I teach the teaching and learning with technology here in the education school, and that is a favorite tool that a lot of them walk away with. So
yeah, thanks for sharing. Before we end, any final questions or comments? Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And Jennifer, thank you very much for sharing your practices. We really appreciate it, and it's really inspiring. If you would like to go back and watch this recording, it's available on YouTube channel. I just put it in the chat box so that you can go ahead and subscribe and ask questions under that recording. Hopefully Jennifer will have time to check out the recording and questions later on. But thank you again. Our next session will start at 12. So hope to see you then. Bye-bye.
thank you for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer.